Hello students, in this video we are going to see what is the meaning of crossover temperature, which is also called as changeover temperature. So it is the temperature at which the sign of delta G changes. To understand this better, if I consider this line as the reaction progression and the center of this, I call this where delta G is equal to 0, means the reaction is at equilibrium. If the sign of delta G becomes positive, means delta G value is greater than 0, then we call that reactions as non-spontaneous reactions. Whereas if the sign of delta G is negative, means delta G is less than 0, then we call those equations or reactions as spontaneous reactions. So students, for a reaction to be spontaneous, the sign convention for delta G should be negative. To understand this better, let us take help of Gibbs equation. So from Gibbs equation, it is delta G of the system is equal to delta H of the system minus T delta S of the system, where delta G is the Gibbs free energy change, this is enthalpy change, and this is entropy change in its standard states. Here, temperature plays a very important role, and that temperature can change a reaction from spontaneous to non-spontaneous or from spontaneous to non-spontaneous to spontaneous reactions. Let us calculate this. So at equilibrium, delta G value will be 0, then delta H standard system minus T delta S system. So rearranging this equation, T delta S standard is equal to delta H system. That is, temperature is equal to delta H standard of the system upon delta S standard of the system. Now this temperature is the equilibrium temperature. Now by increasing or decreasing this temperature, you can make a reaction spontaneous or non-spontaneous. So this temperature is called as crossover or changeover temperature. Let us take one example so that you can understand this temperature better. Now in this problem, they have given the value of delta H standard and delta S standard. By substituting this in this formula, let us calculate this. So temperature is equal to, students, one thing is important, this is given in kJ and this is in J. So let us match the units and substitute the values. So the calculation part will be, this will be minus 224 upon minus 0.153. Now both the values, they are in kJ. Now if you calculate this temperature, then the answer here is 1464 Kelvin. Now this is the temperature where the reaction is at equilibrium. Now to know the crossover temperature, I am using the equation delta G is equal to delta H minus T delta S. Now let us substitute the sign conventions here. For delta H, they have given the negative sign. So negative sign here, and this also is negative. When you open up the brackets, it's like this. Now, if I want the reaction to be spontaneous, the delta G standard must have a negative sign. In order to have a negative sign, delta H should be greater than T delta S product. And if I want this higher than this, the temperature should be decrease. So if I decrease the temperature below 1464, then the reaction can be made spontaneous. So here the crossover temperature is that the reaction will be spontaneous at temperature below 1464 Kelvin. So this is what is called as crossover temperature. The reaction will be spontaneous if the temperature is maintained below 1464 Kelvin. If I increase the temperature, the reaction will become non-spontaneous, and thus this is how you find out the crossover or the changeover temperature. I hope you have understood the concept. So please do like this video, share it with your friends, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel. Thank you students.